Good morning. There were no public comments received by the deadline last night of 5 p.m.
Thank you, Carrie. And good morning, everybody. So we now have the minutes to look at from the last meeting. I have a motion to approve the minutes. Any additions or corrections first? I don't know how there could be any additions.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes of the Board of Supervisors, of the Directors have been approved. So we move immediately to a couple of items here. First is an update on the operational budget from Julie Tim, our CEO.
Okay. I am sharing my screen. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. So good morning, members of the board. Last month, you did adopt the FY 2021 operational budget. This month, I did a little bit of slicing and dicing of that budget to show some of the various ways that the budget is settling out for the year, as far as some of the considerations we've discussed before that will need to be taken into account as we start looking for development of our FY 22 budget, which, although it might seem like it's pretty early to develop that, it is not. You'll be seeing the FY 2022 budget sometime in October or November as our first draft. So the underlying elements and assumptions that we're putting in place this year, we'll need to continue to address here as a policy decision with the board members, as well as policy decision with the regional and local stakeholders. And there we go. Okay. After 4 months of virtual meetings, I'm starting to get the hang of it. So the FY 2021 budget was adopted with a $26 million budget gap, as we discussed in the last several months. The reason for that budget gap is very much focused around changes in the region associated with COVID. We did have to increase our expenses by $4.3 million. And I'll show where that settles out into the budget itself. But as you know, it's very specifically focused on the operations of making sure our staff stay healthy, making sure that we are able to fully clean our vehicles and our facilities, and to be able to account for the sick pay associated with COVID. It also accounts for a $21 million drop in expected revenues based on what we expected to receive back in November. The actual revenues we received account for a decrease in the pass and affairs, a decrease in advertising as our local vendors are trying to protect their businesses, and a decrease in the projections of money that we received from Richmond and RICO, as well as a state projection. I'll point out that the decrease in RICO money is based on the actual service we received in amount, not a budgeted amount. So that's the reason why there's some differences there. So what that looks like when you consider how we're spending the money year over year, this shows from 2017 to our current budget, how the funds we have received are allocated in our operational budget. That second to last blue line in each column that says the P FY 2021, P was the projected 2021 budget that was developed back in November. That was originally our baseline that we started before we had the discussions about regional money or COVID or protests. That was our $59 million budget, $55.9 million budget we originally anticipated. The green shows the actual budget that was adopted with the increases associated with changes under the COVID state of emergency, where all that money is going into the care of our staff, the cleaning of our bus, and the sick leave associated with that. When you consider what that looks like as a single year, considering the budget in November 2019 of $56 million versus what was actually adopted, the $60 million budget, operational budget that was adopted, you can see that there was a creation of about a $26 million hole that is being fully filled by the Federal CARES Act funding to be able to make sure that we are able to continue as reliable as possible under COVID and protest service for FY21 throughout the course of the year. Now, whether or not we put fares back or whether or not we're able to receive additional funding from the region or localities are unknown, which is why it's so critical that we continue to monitor and assess our budget ongoing through the entire year. The brown on the left side of the screen shows the fares that are no longer on the right side. There's a slight reduction in the amount of money we're receiving from the state, just because the projected increase that we assumed we would normally get, that did not come through this year, and we're still watching as they are slowly releasing the allocations for the year. And of course, the reduction of what was budgeted by our local partners, Richmond and RICO, as they prepare for some of these economic downturns this year. When you look at that jurisdiction by jurisdiction as a fair share allocation of our federal and state subsidies by mile, by jurisdiction, this shows how the CARES Act money is filling the subsidies by jurisdiction. Again, the 4.6 million miles that Richmond is served with, the 1.3 million miles that Enrico is served with, they're receiving a large portion of the subsidies for the CARES Act funding. Next year, what's not on here is showing that we do expect a lot of the miles from Richmond and a lot of the miles from Enrico will be regionalized. I'm using my finger quotes here because we'll go through a conversation to show how some of those routes that are currently serving and being paid for the jurisdictions are actually serving the entire region and would be eligible potentially for CVTA money, which will reduce the burden from Richmond and Enrico and reduce that funding gap for next year. Even so, as we look to regionalize those local routes and input CVTA money into our budget for fiscal year 21, we do expect that there still will be some amount of gap in the budget to be filled. That could be filled by increases in local subsidies back to the levels of last year. It could be filled by reinstating fares sometime this year or next year. It could be filled as a last resort by a reduction of local service. Which ones of those are actually implemented will be a conversation with the policy of the board and with our local stakeholders and our ownership of Richmond and Chesterfield, but it will likely be at least 2, if not 3 of these initiatives will be necessary to fill the budget gap, projected budget gap for FY 2022. And so we'll have to consider the conversations about which strategies we use and in what order as we develop the FY 2022 budget. And Mr. Chairman and members of the board, that concludes the presentation on the operational considerations of our budget for next year.
Thanks, Julie. Are there any questions or comments on this presentation? Pretty straightforward. Obviously, the thing we're looking at with the CARES Act has really taken care of us, as it did for many operations. But there is a cliff next year, and you guys see that list for us to look at as how we go forward, and that will have to do with a lot of the negotiations and conversations with our going forward here. All right, thank you very much. You have another presentation, Julie.
I do, and I realized after late last night that I should have handed this presentation off to Adrian, and next time this comes up, Adrian's on the hook for it. So I'm sure that with her knowledge of this, she could have done this more justice. But with that said, this is a presentation that I was asked to prepare specifically for the Richmond City Council this afternoon for their Land Use, Housing, and Transportation Committee. They are focusing currently on possible proposals for use of their properties in the downtown area and how to dispose of and develop those properties. One of those properties is immediately adjacent to our temporary transfer plaza. I was asked to present on what our plans are for relocation of that transfer plaza, and this is the resulting presentation for that. Okay. Specifically, when we look at the transfer center needs for our system currently, what we look at are those areas that have a high level of interconnectivity and transfers between routes. we have 5 of those locations throughout our system as it's currently developed, with the hot spots really focusing in downtown Richmond area, very close to where our current temporary transfer plaza is located in the very center. What our temporary transfer center looks like is a linear structure, or not structure, a linear transfer plaza that spans 2 blocks on 9th Street between Marshall and Lee, immediately adjacent to the Public Safety Building and the Department of Social Services Building. It's also immediately adjacent to parcel 9001, which was the subject of a possible permanent home for our transfer facility under the Navy Hill development proposal. Currently, the Public Safety Building on the opposite side of the street is under an unsolicited proposal bid with the City Council, and they're considering whether or not to accept that. Either of any of the development of the properties around that area would impact our ability to serve our customers along that transfer plaza. Over the past 20 years, the City of Richmond and GRTC have been looking for a home for a permanent transfer plaza. This slide, all the red blocks on this slide show the locations that have been considered over the past 20 years for a possible permanent location. My understanding, of course, much of this predates my time, is that when the city and GRTC have gotten close to finding a permanent home, the properties that were cited as a possibility were also cited for other higher and better uses for the downtown area, which led us to continue to be put in temporary areas and eventually to our current location, the transfer plaza. You can see the location of the transfer plaza is the vertical yellow line, with the 2 red properties I talked about on either side of it up for possible development. And you can see that if either of those are developed, that it would definitely displace our temporary transfer plaza, at least temporarily while the construction happens, if not permanently, depending on how that construction and development occurs. I showed the two closest locations of pulse stations near our temporary transfer plaza for a reference. The yellow line across shows the pulse. When we look,
let me ask a quick question.
Yes, sir.
All those here that we've considered over the past couple of decades, none of those are any longer available. Is that correct?
That is not exactly correct. Some of them, for example, the site, the parcel I said that was the site immediately to, if you look where the current temporary transfer plaza is, the vertical yellow line, the property on the left-hand side, that's the 9th Street parcel that was looked under Navy Hill. That is technically available, city owned. There's also the property, which I'll talk about towards the end of the presentation, between 4th and 5th Street, I believe, next to the Hilton across from the convention center. That is still a parking area that's owned by the city, is available. So some of these properties are still open and owned by the city. Whether or not they are still available for use or the city has other plans, I don't know. I would have to look into it. And we're in conversation with the city right now, city leadership, to look and see which of these parcels might still be acceptable by the city for a permanent home.
Okay, so it's not like you don't have a date for Saturday night. It's just I'm waiting for an offer that is. Okay, I get it.
It's not real encouraging, George. The one we've got right now, you know, the city is almost certainly going to accept this offer for development of that safety welfare building. They've got a big one.
Sure.
It's tax paying, and they're, you know, can hardly bear waiting for it. And so that kicks us right out. The thing across the street on 9th Street is vacant, but with the construction going on, it probably wouldn't work, or at least that's a big issue.
What I would note on this slide prior to moving on is that 4th Street property we talked about, the parking area is somewhere around here. And the Marshall Street property we've looked at in the past, I'll reference these later in the presentation, is around here. So just remember those 2 locations as possible areas that we're offering up as future temporary transfer plazas as we look for a permanent home. When we look at that 9th Street location, however, the area that was originally offered as a permanent location for the transfer plaza under the Navy Hill proposal, that's this purple block here. I don't know if you can see my mouse on your screen. I can see it on mine. I don't think you can. It's the purple block in the middle that shows that property. The red lines on either side of it and the red lines on the larger map show possible future locations and extensions of high capacity BRT or high capacity transit. So that parcel is essentially located in the nexus of where those routes might come together. It also shows in the blue lines on the map where there are existing local routes and express routes that also come very close proximity to that. So if you're looking at the network as it's currently designed, that property does have a high level of feasibility for being a transfer plaza. One of the reasons why we had trouble with it in the Navy Hill proposal wasn't necessarily the location so much as needing further description and discussion over the financing plan for it. If this property were to be identified as a permanent home, we would still need to address those financing issues for ownership, construction, planning, development. Those issues have not gone away. Okay. So there's a lot of words. I wanted to put them all on the screen, but I'll summarize it so you don't have to read them all. Really, we have some challenges when we're looking at a relocation of a temporary transfer plaza. One of the first is that later in this board presentation, I'll talk about our capital funding. The majority of our capital funding that we have available to do these types of projects is already flexed over into operations, which means our amount of federal funding we have to put into infrastructure is very limited. We're also limited in that we don't have ownership of property in downtown. All the properties we're looking at, including the city streets that we operate on right now and the sidewalks we operate on right now, are either state or city owned. So we don't have any control of our destiny about selecting and going after and building a property, other than if we were to go in and physically purchase it and go through the permitting process independent of any city correspondence or communication, and that is not really an option for us either. We need to do these things in partnership with the community and our stakeholders. And then we do have some options, though. The two properties that I pointed out in the map a few minutes ago. That would be there's a parking lot on 4th and Broad that's adjacent to our pull stations, and there's also on-street options on Marshall, somewhere between 3rd and 8th. Both of those very near the convention center. Those are parcels and properties that were considered under the Navy Hill development as potential alternatives to the 9th Street. They do have challenges to them. It wouldn't be perfect solutions. I would have to say there are no perfect solutions. There are acceptable solutions, and these could potentially be acceptable solutions. They will require further conversations with the stakeholders in the city to see whether or not other people agree that they're acceptable. So recommendations that I'll be asking the City Council to consider would be creating some sort of working group, whether it's at staff level or a formal joint task force or ad hoc committee, to really look at this issue and jointly advance planning, development, and financing for a specific property for a permanent home for the transfer center, knowing that as we look at it, there are a wealth of items that we need to consider as a team for transportation connectivity and mobility in the downtown area. And Mr. Chairman and members of the board, if there are no questions, that concludes this presentation.
Well, let me stop and ask if there are any questions or items for discussion here.
Hey, Julie, I was curious if your discussion with the city will be mainly focused on one downtown transfer center. Are you going to also throw in the potential to have smaller transfer centers in those locations that you showed earlier, in addition to maybe a smaller downtown transfer center? How are you approaching that?
Right now, we've been really focusing on the idea of a single larger transfer center right where the yellow hot spot is in the center. That's around where the majority of our transfers happen. I know that when I got here originally, I was asked to look to see if we could do some smaller centers, and you can see all on the pulse line, there are spots that where you could have, we already have existing transfers, little hot spots. So we will look at that and consider it. I still believe that when you look at the level of transfers we have during the daytime and the evening around 4th and 9th Street, there is a definite reasonable solution to have a single transfer center that would support these needs in the downtown area that would be associated with green space, open space, businesses, development, and open air environment. Whether or not we can find property, if we can't find property, then we will be pushed towards that smaller, more of a chain of pearls type of scenario. So I wouldn't say it's off the table. It's certainly something that I know that our chairman and yourself have both asked me to look at in the past, and it continues to be on the table.
Other questions or comments? So you have a meeting today with the City Council's Committee on whatever it's called, transportation, et cetera, where you will be presenting these, actually both of these last presentations, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that's, as you know, our conversations with the city involve not only dealing with City Council, but also presentations to the staff and to the mayor. So we're always dealing with at least 3 parties in our city conversations. All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda, certificate of appreciation for local vendors. Carrie, I believe.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Following the COVID-19 emergency, GRTC has procured essential items from the vendors to support our ongoing operations as we provide critical service to the public. GRTC appreciates the services provided by these vendors. GRTC continues to procure necessary items, and I provided a list as of June 23rd of the vendors and items procured, which is included in your board packet. The recommendation is that the Board of Directors authorizes the board chair and the CEO to sign these certificates of appreciation, which say, GRTC is proud to partner during COVID-19 to support our operations during this incredibly difficult time. Your services are sincerely appreciated. Certificates will be mailed and printed and digitally shared with the vendors who are not accessible by snail mail.
Thank you. All right, do you have any further comments on this, Carrie?
No, sir.
Okay, could I have a motion to this effect?
So moved.
Okay, second? Did I hear that? As long as you can figure out where the second is, Janice, I don't care. Have you got it? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It's passed, and we are grateful. It's, it's nice to know that there's still some people in town making things, and that there's are available local sources for this. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
I plan to go down to Reservoir Distillery and thank them personally.
Well done, George.
Good, George. Thank you. All right. Okay, operations report. Mr. Barham, operating performance report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Starting with the overview of the KPIs, our OTP for fixed route this past month was 66.80%, compared to last month, which is 69.20%. A little bit of a decrease there. Part of the reason, or the main reason, was because of the ongoing protests that we had throughout a good part of the month, which affected the OTP, particularly the first half of the month. And along with that, our lost trip rate was also affected. We had 1,360 lost trips for the month, as opposed to 1,077 for the month of May. And like I said, some of that was due to the protest activity. And the first part of June, the first few days, we actually shortened our service day because of safety concerns and so forth. So that affected the amount of trips we were able to operate, at least for that part of the month.
So Tim, seriously, that rate is not as severe now as it was then?
No, we've done a little better, and the protests have decreased quite a bit. and the ones that we've had over the last few weeks kind of sporadic, and we've been able to manage around that a little much better.
What is our pre-COVID lost trip rate?
Roughly we were in that, 700-800 range. But over the last few months, it's gone over 1,000. And
what percentage of our trips is that?
It's like 99 well, it's less than 1%. We still operate, around 99, over 99% of our trips. So it's less than 1%.
Thank you.
Looking at our customer complaints, we were around 1.60 per 10,000 riders for the month compared to May, which is 1.28. So a little slight uptick, but still within our normal range as far as complaints go. The FITS report, you'll start to see a pattern, and I'll clarify that once I go through the numbers real briefly. For our local fixed route service, we were down compared to this time last year, 10.97%. Compared to around 92%, compared to a little over 93% from last month or from May. And the total combined fixed route service was down a little under 23%, compared to 32% in May.
That is including the pulse, is that what you're saying?
It's including the pulse, yes.
But the regular fixed route service is only down 10%.
That's excluding the pulse.
Right.
Yes, that's yeah, all the other runs, exception of the pulse. The care service was down about 44.7% compared to about 56% in the month of May. Care on demand down about 36% compared to 51% in May. So the overall service was down about 23.5% compared to May, which is 32, almost 33%. And then for the fiscal year, we finished about 2.68%. So what you see there is overall, all of our modes have decreased not as significantly as we've had in prior months. So as we move into different stages, we're in phase 3 now. Some of the restrictions have been lifted. More people are out there in the service area, working, going about their daily lives. So we're starting to steadily see that increase in ridership. And as I pointed out earlier, our local fixed route service is almost back to, back to normal levels. Route 111, I know that folks want to keep a track on that as well. Our goal had been to operate around 140 riders on a given weekday. For the month of June, we were averaging around 101. But for Saturday, the ridership goal was around 70, and we actually averaged about 96. So more people were traveling on Saturdays as opposed to during the week. So we'll keep monitoring it and see how we continue to work on that service. For the specialized care trips, we were around 90, a little under 93% on-time performance compared to last month. We were about 95%. So a little bit down, but still well above what we normally would operate. And complaints continue to be down as well. I think we only had about 3 or so complaints last month. So we continue to run good service despite all the issues that have been going on around the area. For COVID-19 initiatives and maintenance, we this past month changed or added a destination code on our signs on our buses to say face mask required. So we added that this past month. Also, we issued out filtered masks to all of our employees that have the GRTC logo. So if you ever go out in the service area or you see some folks, operators and so forth, they have those masks that have GRTC across them. So it's a good identifier to know that folks are staying in compliance as far as wearing the mask.
Are your operators reporting that people are wearing masks more frequently now?
To some degree, we still have some customers from time to time that either don't want to wear a mask or don't have one. We issue them out when we have available. We have a stack or a stock of them customer masks that we try to hand out as well. So as customers board the bus, we can ask them to wear a mask as well. So we still see that from time to time, but more people nowadays are wearing them. And then going into the, also as far as PPEs go, we also have issued all of our employees, or operators rather, sanitary wipes and disinfectant spray. So each operator, as part of their standard equipment, has been issued each of those items. And then when those items run out, they turn them back in and get replacements for them. Driver shields, we talked about that last month as far as that ongoing project. We've just about finished with the fixed route fleet. We're now working on the specialized vans, so we hope to be complete with that within the next few weeks. Also installed plexiglass shields through certain places around the facility, at the front desk, the administrative assistance desk in the maintenance department, at the storeroom window, and also at 2 dispatch windows. And frontline pay bonus, the second one was given out on July the 2nd. Once that was approved by the board this past month, we wanted to make sure that was issued out as quickly as possible. So all the employees, frontline employees, received those just in time for the as far as staffing goes, we're currently at 279 full-time operators, 21 part-time operators. We had a class that started back on June the 6th with 4 new operators. We currently have 3 in that class. We've been working with the marketing and HR departments on our recruiting efforts. We're working on a plan to step up our recruiting and so forth, despite the challenges and with the COVID environment. We're hopefully optimistic we'll have another class next month, and we'll continue to recruit and train and hire as needed. One of the things we discovered over this current recruitment period is, we're still getting a stream of people to come in, and we're getting a decent amount of folks, but once we go through the screening process and then start to schedule interviews and so forth, unfortunately, some of the individuals either found other jobs or we just don't get responses for them. So we suspect that some of the people may be just fulfilling their requirements as far as, applying for jobs, but we're still hopefully going to continue to do what we can to make sure we have enough operators to manage accordingly.
There are a whole lot of unemployed people out there, Tim.
Yes, and we are widening our net to try to get as many as we can here. So we'll continue to do what we can to bring them in. And that concludes my report. Yes, sir.
Other questions to Mr. Barham?
Yeah, Tim, when is the next run pool schedule?
September the 13th.
Okay.
Okay.
And
Right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just a quick elaboration is that normally we're budgeted to have 290 operators, 26 part-time. So we are close to fully staffed, but it is challenging getting new operators in here. Even with the people unemployed, as Tim mentioned, not everyone is necessarily interested in being employed. And some people who are interested in being employed, once they understand the challenges of being a bus driver, while we do take care of and pay our people well, being a bus operator is a very challenging position. The biggest issue I think Tim is facing, even though we have a fairly close to full complement of drivers, is that we are being very open with making sure that people are quarantined when they possibly have symptoms, when they possibly have been exposed, to make sure that we don't have any additional cases here where there might be spread, where we might see a cluster or a surge. So even though we're close to being fully staffed, we also have quite a bit of sick leave of people who are quarantined to protect the rest of the staff from infection. So Tim and his staff have been incredibly, the performance that they've put out on the street is valiant, I would say, just to make sure that the amount of service that we continue to maintain still is out there every single day in the face of this. So compliments to Tim and his entire team for that.
So you're saying that even though we have 279 and 20, that's if everybody's able to function, right?
Correct.
But I do think that the pool of people who are unemployed or who are wondering how important job security is in the future would be a larger pool, and so I'm thinking it's a time for us to take advantage of that, and Carrie and others who figure out how to make these positions known, I'd hope we're really doubling down on that at this moment.
Carrie did put out, we did have some ads that ran in June on, I believe, Carrie, if you want to jump in and correct me, come about to say some stuff that I'm not sure is 100% correct, but I believe it was advertising on TV, Carrie? Sorry.
That is correct. We did a blend of what we have done over the past year, where it's both on air as well as digital. And when I mean digital, that includes streaming services as well as your now traditional Facebook style advertisements that are targeting. We did geofence ads where we are plugging in specific locations that we're interested in targeting. For example, major truck stops, CDL training schools, school bus locations where we can get to people that we know are already CDL drivers and try and rope them in.
Okay, any further comments or questions?
Carrie.
Thank you, Mr. Barham.
Thank you.
Tommy Carter around?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Good to see you. I think it's your report.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Monthly report reads for the month of June. We did have a decrease in accidents from last month. The accidents are still consistent of the same type of trending events, minor contact with other vehicles, fixed objects, mirror contacts, things of that nature. We're still seeing a lot of non-preventable accidents, meaning that the operators aren't at fault for the accidents. We're staying on everybody about, staying safe as possible. Training staff is constantly going over different techniques to make sure the operators are doing everything they can to be as safe as possible. Preventable accidents for the month of June, we're at 9. Non-preventable accidents for the month of June, we're at 20. And just to add a little bit to that, me and Julie had a conversation. We are going to give you a little bit more details. I hate when I go over this report, it sounds like I'm saying the same thing over and over again. I want to give you a little bit more detail. So starting next month, we'll get together and discuss some things, and hopefully we can add a little more detail to the actual report for the safeties, just to, brighten up everybody. I'll give you more of an explanation of what's actually going on. But overall, the numbers are looking good so far as the amount of accidents that we're having. To add to what Julie and Tim were saying about COVID initiatives and everything, as you can imagine, OSHA and the Department of Labor are coming up with new standards every day. And what we're trying to do is stay on top of those as much as we can to keep everyone as safe as possible. In fact, a lot of my staff, and I know HR staff, are on a COVID webinar that starts at 9 o'clock, just keeping up with the details that they've come up with that are supposed to go into effect next week. And then the Department of Labor is coming out with some more details that we'll probably try to implement as much as we can, if not all those standards, by the end of this month, so that we can have everything in place just to keep everyone as safe as possible. Other than that, there are no questions. That concludes the safety report.
Well, I'm glad to hear OSHA's working there. I hope they do something for poultry plants. Thank you, Tony. Any questions? And we're going to talk to you in a minute again about a safety plan, I think.
Yes, sir.
Oh, so an update. Let's see. This is you, Adrian. September service plan.
Yes, I'm going to share my screen. All right. Well, good morning.
Morning.
Provide you with an overview of what we have proposed for the September changes. A lot of this you have already seen. We're moving forward. We had originally planned for May pre-COVID. So most of them are kind of a repeat, as well as one change that we had proposed for September. So for the 1A, 1B, 1C, we have service changes proposed for Saturday schedule, and that is on the 1B. When the 2 was changed back in last August, it served the hospital, Chippenham Hospital, all day. The 1B used to do that just because the 2B didn't. So rather than having the redundant service, we pulled the 1B out. And the benefit of that is we were actually able to increase frequency on Saturday schedule on the south side, increasing from 60 minutes to 40 minutes on the 1B.
What hospital is that, Adrian?
Chippenham Hospital.
Okay.
On Sunday, something we've talked about quite a bit, even before the network plan actually went into place, was the Route 1, and we are having issues with the on-time performance on the 1A, 1B, 1C. So a solution we had proposed and been reviewing was splitting off the Chamberlain to Southside portion and then having the legs, is what we call them, the 1A and the 1C on the south side as separate routes. The benefit of this is that the 1A, 1B, 1C, just the inconsistency in the actual alignment, the miles, ended up with it just unreliable in terms of actually hitting that 15-minute frequency. So in Sunday service, we are going to do this. And then if it works out well as far as improving on-time performance, we're going to also replicate this on weekday service. Added benefit to this is that we are also able to increase frequency on the 1C on Sunday from 60 minutes to 40 minutes. A small change on the 2B, the alignment change to incorporate Ladies Mile. This is just a small redirection up to Ladies Mile and then back over to North Avenue. This is only the 2B, the 2A and the 2C will stay on North Avenue. And I'll get into the actual alignments when we get there. The 50 will be extended down to Marshall and 2nd. The 75 will be absorbed into the 76, 77, and 79. The 76 is going to be realigned to make sure that we will still have 2 routes that serve St. Mary's Hospital. The 77 will be extended to serve the current area, the fan that does not have service, as well as taking up the portion the 75 currently covers for U of R. The 78, we did a runtime adjustment, and the benefit of that is we were able to increase frequency to 40 minutes on that route as well. And the 79, again, to make sure there's 2 routes that serve St. Mary's, was realigned, a slight detour to St. Mary's Hospital. So just to show you visually what I just went over, the 1A, 1C, you'll see the routing is exactly the same, but the main difference here is the red line would be what is we're calling the 1. So there would be transfers now. Some of them are already occurring because people may catch the 1A or they may catch the 1C and transfer at Southside Plaza today. This would require everyone to transfer, but it does end up having additional frequency service in the south side. The 2B, this is the small change. You'll see the little triangle added on the right map opposed to the current, just go straight up North Avenue. For the Route 50, this is the extension down to 2nd and 3rd in Marshall. The 75, this is just showing the route as it is today, where it goes from Milan to U of R. It is peak service only, and it's only on a weekday. So we will, and St. Mary's is the little M in the middle. So that will still be served by the 79 and the 76. This is 76 showing the slight change to serve St. Mary's. The 77 change. So you'll remember that we are on detour. It's been, I think, over a year now where we're on 3 Chop. So that's the little triangle up in the upper left corner of the current service. This is the permanent recommended solution to get us off of detour. We cannot go back on Libby Avenue because of just the way the street pattern is there. So this solves that problem as well as gives back that Grove service we used to have on the 16 that went through the fan. As well as connects VCU as well as U of R. The 79, this just shows the slight change to serve St. Mary's Hospital. And what we are also keeping in place, continuing some of our current changes that we implemented with COVID, the 4A, 4B, and we just analyzed the ridership earlier this week, I guess yesterday. To continue the 30-minute service all day. Previously, pre-COVID, we had 15-minute service at peak. We still have lower uses on those trips. So in order to keep resources on other routes. We're going to keep that service at 30-minute all day. And the 39, since we do have other routes that do offer similar service, that will stay temporarily discontinued. And we are monitoring on a daily basis Spectran use for the express routes. We've identified some routes that we will end up putting back, like the 82. We are having ridership increases on that route, so we will put a fixed route vehicle back. We will continue to monitor that as it gets closer to September. But at this point in time, the Spectran vehicles will be mixed in with fixed route for operating for those services. And for next steps, we are finishing up the Title VI analysis, and that will be presented at the next board meeting with the final findings. We have a public meeting scheduled for Thursday, July 23rd, and of course that will be virtual from 12 to 1. And then granted everything goes okay, proposed changes will go into effect on September 13th. That is the end of the presentation. Any questions?
Questions, conversation?
Yeah, I have a question probably for Julie. Julie, are you still in negotiations on the Oak Grove Commerce Road loop?
The conversations have kind of come to a stop. We had the original conversation you asked to reach out to them. We reached out. Adrian was looking at other possible development around that area to see if it made sense to include that for future extensions. Right now with our budget, we don't, all of these changes that you're seeing right now are budget neutral. The developer that was asking for the extension of the route, while they seemed to be willing to pay for maybe the first year of extension, they certainly didn't feel like they had the capacity for ongoing year over year. So that's not included in this, but it is still a consideration to see if, as that area develops and there's transit needs there, if that could be included in future uses as we have the money, the staffing, the vehicles to support it. Adrian, is that correct?
Yeah.
Please let me know if I said that incorrectly.
This would be an extension out Commerce Road?
Correct.
Or don't we currently have service on Commerce Road?
This would be the 87, and it would take a slight, maybe 3 blocks each direction to actually go on Commerce Road and then go back.
So the 50 is being extended from Hermitage all the way down to 2nd Street?
Yes.
I didn't realize it was going that far. We were going to stop it earlier than that at one point.
As far as transfers and connections, it just made, as far, Marshall 3rd and 2nd is where we have most of our route connection points. So bringing them all the way rather than forcing them to transfer again on the poles.
Okay. Any other questions on routes? Are we covering St. Mary's early and late so they can get their shift changes?
Yes, the 76 also compared to the 75 operates on the weekend, so it also gives them weekend service.
Okay. All right, thank you so much, Adrian, and thanks for the way you do this.
Welcome.
Yeah. All right, next a report from, oh, you've done the civil rights thing, right? So now we're at Tony again and Monica.
Well, so there's actually an update for our Title VI program update, which we do every 3 years.
All right.
Recall, we got extended because of the Title VI complaint against the network redesign. So now that we are back on schedule, just giving you an update on the timeline. Great, let's pull it up. All right, so we are currently finishing our level and quality service analysis. That will be completed this month. And then we have public outreach that we've scheduled for the beginning of August. And then we'll be coming back to the board for approval of our full program update. So any changes in outreach as well as the policy for approval, and that will be in September. And we are due to submit to FDA for review and concurrence in October.
This is our new Title VI statement that we're working on, you're saying?
Every 3 years, they just require us to review our whole network and then change our policy if anything has changed in the circular. So this is just our
we had a complaint against our network redesign. Has that been dealt with, or is that just being dealt with in this process?
So this was originally due in April, and then in March, they actually gave us the findings or the reaction to the actual complaint. They said that since it took so long to get to us and they gave us an extension, there was no actual finding, but they just want us to put our methodology in the actual analysis moving forward.
Thank you. You don't need any approval or anything on this?
No, it's just an update.
All right, thank you. Now, Tony and Monica, right? Agency safety plan adoption.
Yes, sir. Let me share this and hope that this works. Can everyone see this?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right, with that being said,
Tony, if I
yes.
can jump in, could you go back to where you were at slideshow
Okay.
and hit start from beginning? And hit the from beginning. There you go. Thank you,
Okay.
sir.
All right. What we're doing is we're presenting the GRTC Agency Safety Plan. Monica is assisting with me with this. The reason why I asked Monica to do this is because she's done a lot of the work on this and just done a wonderful job with being in charge of this, gathering information and interviewing different departments. Monica is our workers' compensation consultant, and like I said, has jumped on board with this and hit the ground running. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to her. She can take off with the presentation.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
So we're going to review the GRTC Agency Safety Plan. And so you're probably thinking, well, doesn't GRTC already have a safety plan in place, or what's new and why we need to talk about it now? Go to the next slide. Okay, so in July 2018, the FTA actually published a final rule that addressed public transportation operator systems who received FTA grant funding. And what they basically said was you have to have this plan in place, and it has to be in accordance with the safety management systems approach. So you couldn't just check a box and say it's done, but there's an actual certification and approval process that's involved. So this final rule actually had a compliance date of July 2020 originally, but then we know what happened a few months ago, COVID-19, you're right. And so as a result of that, COVID presented a lot of challenges for different agencies. So the FTA was gracious enough to extend the deadline to December. However, GRTC was able to fortunately stay on the same schedule, and we were able to meet the original deadline date. Okay, so this is the overview of the plan, which kind of goes over how the documented process works. There are four things that are highlighted here in the first bullet point. In addition to that, we also focused on safety performance targets, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. We also were able to see ways to help us improve our employee safety reporting program and to focus on the annual review to make necessary adjustments. So it'd be something that would be kind of ongoing. And so while this plan does not have to be submitted to the FTA for approval, it does have to be approved by the GRTC CEO and the GRTC Board of Directors. And then it will be regulated through the triennial review process. So it's something, again, that we have to have in place if we want to continue to receive transit funding. Okay, so I spoke about the safety management system, or SMS approach. And what this basically is a formal top-down data-driven organization-wide approach to managing safety risks. So through this ASP plan, we're able to do several things, several wonderful things. We can control risks better. We can identify and correct safety problems earlier. We're able to analyze data more closely and then measure safety performance more precisely. And so in the second bullet point, it highlights how we're also able to identify risk factors beyond our control. So what does that look like? So say, for instance, there's in one of our bus stops, there's a hanging tree branch, which we cannot control foliage. That's something beyond our control. This time of year, everything's kind of in full bloom and so forth. We also have thunderstorms and things that may also damage the branches. We can't control that either. But it still poses a risk. So GRTC works with the community to notify the jurisdictions responsible, or, based on where the stop is located. And hopefully, in many cases, they've sent someone out, the branches get trimmed, the risk is mitigated, everyone remains safe. So now we go to the other end of the spectrum, something a little more significant or major, I should say. We rewind just a couple months back, really a few weeks ago, really, to where we had the protests that took place here in Richmond. And we know that one of the events actually resulted in significant damage to one of the buses. We all saw that. That was beyond GRTC's control. When the bus operator pulls up to the light, and then the protesters went from being peaceful to not so much, and kind of moved in around the bus, and we know what happened after that. Well, that was something that was beyond our control. We're not used to seeing things of that nature here. But looking at the ASP, the importance of it, it helps us to be able to handle events like this, to be able to keep everyone safe, to identify and mitigate the risks, even when it involves things beyond our control. So what did GRTC do in that instance? Well, again, we were able to partner with the community, determine whether or not it was okay or safe to have service, and if so, when, and then how to do so safely so that we could mitigate risks in that fashion. So these are just two examples, one end of the spectrum to the other, which kind of illustrates risk factors that may be beyond our control, and how GRTC uses the ASP in partnering with the community to try to mitigate risks all the way around. So we look at the objectives. Again, we go back to the protests. There's a lot happening all over Richmond during that time when we had different pockets of protesters along different routes. Those events had to be reviewed daily by senior management, as well as them working along with the community and using resources and the decision-making process through the ASP to determine what was safe, how to mitigate risks. And so even at one point, it was determined that smaller vehicles on certain routes would be better suited to keep everyone safe, whether you were a protester or whether you were someone that needed to catch the bus to get to a particular place. And they were able to do that for a brief period of time. But this put GRTC in a position to manage hazards and mitigate risks, and everything was successful to make, until things were a little more manageable here. So the next few slides, I'll turn the presentation back over to Tony Carter, and he'll kind of elaborate on these slides.
All right, thank you, Monica. Basically, the next few slides, like Monica said, I'm going to go over, and basically this is the drive of the actual safety plan. This is how we're going to measure the actual success of it, and the performance targets. Performance targets are basically what we monitor and what we actually have to report. One is fatalities, total number of fatalities reported to NTD. Injuries, total number of injuries reported to NTD. And the total number of safety events that we report to NTD. Safety events are defined as collision, derailment, fire hazard, material spill, or evacuation. And that's a reliability, which is the distance between major mechanical failures by each mode, each transportation mode. That's not actually reported to NTD, and that information was gathered from talking with the maintenance department and doing an average over a certain amount of time based off the actual breakdowns of roll calls that we have. As I said, GRT safety performance targets were formed from data that was collected both from the risk management department and the maintenance department. This data was collected and reviewed over a 5-year sample and broke down into a monthly average. The monthly average is based on what GRTC actually has to report to NTD on a monthly basis. And these are actual targets and breakdowns that we have. Now, this information is going to be, of course, targeted every month. What we plan to do is actually report out to the board of directors as well as staff members quarterly. So that's the way that you'll be able to be updated on how we're performing. The targets themselves are based off of, like I said, information that was gathered over a 5-year mean and the information that is reported to NTD. At the end of the year annually, NTD and FTA is requiring that we review these targets and make sure that these are targets that we're being hit. Or it may be a situation that we find that these targets are set too low or they're set too high. And that's sort of how the plan is supposed to be designed. It's supposed to be able to gauge what you're doing as an overall, as a result to safety, and focusing on certain things that you may have to improve, that you're doing too well on, or you may be a situation where you're not doing well enough on. This plan is designed so that you can have a way of guiding and achieving those targets and overall keeping everyone as safe as possible. What we plan on doing, and it's a little early right now, but as I'm sure you're aware, all these public transit organizations around the area, all over the company, all over the country are actually doing this. And what we plan on doing is once we get further into this, we're starting to have like peer reviews with other organizations just to see where they are with their targets and see how they're performing on theirs. And it's a way of discussing ideas and certain things on how to maintain, safety targets and stay on goal with everything. So in the future, we hope to be able to, talk with different organizations and see where they are with their things and they're doing, so that we can see how we compare to them and how they compare to us, and any ideas, anything that we have, we can of course communicate, come up with ideas on how to make sure everyone is remaining as safe as possible. As I stated, GRTC will update the board quarterly on both safety performance targets, achievements, and the SMS implementation of it. GRTC will also provide this information quarterly to all the employees and contractors, as well as emphasizing everyone's empowerment on safety-related matters. That's very important to this overall project as well, because we can track this all day long. Management staff can do this, but it's only as effective as those that are out on the front line that are seeing this stuff, that are seeing what's going on. And once they're reported to us, we are able to then track it and mitigate the actual hazards and risks that come up. So we want to empower, we want to get everybody on board with this and make sure that everyone understands that this is only going to be successful if everybody buys into and everybody works with this. And I'll let Monica explain the implementation of the plan.
Sure. So regarding implementation of the GRTC's agency safety plan, so how this is going to look is that certain members of the safety department are going to work along with the directors and managers for the ASP overview. And of course, we're going to encourage participation from all employees, which we recognize is going to involve a lot of campaigning and conversations to make everyone aware. Regarding the employee safety reporting program, it is currently in use, but through the ASP, we were able to look at ways to expand it so that employees have multiple ways to report any risk or concerns that they may see out there, hazards, and even to do so with the option of being anonymous if they choose to. Currently, we also have a testing system in place to improve our process for reporting accidents and incidents so that it's done electronically. And that way, all the information can be centrally located, and it will make it more accessible to everyone that needs to be involved so that we have the information quicker. And this will help us to keep a closer eye on things and be able to react faster. So basically, in conclusion, GRTC has a safety culture that's already in place, and to a large degree, it's already working. But this ASP has actually helped us to recognize the need to promote organization-wide involvement from everyone, encourage, as Tony mentioned earlier, employee empowerment. We want everyone to be involved. And overall, this plan is going to help us to continue to look at our practices and look at ways to improve, make necessary adjustments as we see them where they're needed, and to ultimately promote a safety, or a safer, I should say, culture here at GRTC, and to make that safety culture stronger.
Thank you. So questions or thoughts here? Who's the person most in charge of monitoring the safety plan?
That would be me. I'm the actual chief safety officer / risk director. However, the account executive would be Julie. So ultimately, Julie would, be in charge of the research everything, but it's my job as the chief safety officer by the plan to report to Julie and let Julie know what's going on, what we need, anything that we're finding, and that will come out in those quarterly reports.
Yeah. Well, I recognize in the report the two of you have given that what you've done is to take an enormous amount of work and boil it down to a very simple statement, that's quite an achievement. So thank you for the work on this thing. That's part. Any further questions? I think we're supposed to adopt this, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Could I have a motion to adopt this plan?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded that we adopt the safety plan proposed by Tony and Monica. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It's adopted. Thank you very much, the two of you, for that hard work and the clarity with which you presented it.
Thank you.
So now we move on to insurance policies award. Tony Carter, I believe, again.
If I may jump in, Tony, you'll need to unshare your screen, if please. Okay. And I also want to share my screen very quickly as Tony does this. Let's see. Last night you received an email from me that provided a substitute board item, action item for the liability insurance premium contract. That's what I'm showing on my screen. It also has a second page here. So you received that by email. We'll certainly post this online, but wanted to have this on screen as Tony discusses it. And with that, I'll pass it off to Tony. Thank you.
All right, so every year, GRTC has to renew basic coverages that we carry throughout the year. Coverages consist of general liability, auto liability for paratransit, fixed route units, umbrella excess liability coverage, employment practices, fiduciary limit liability, crime insurance, cyber insurance, and professional liability coverage. GRTC contracts with Arthur J. Gallagher as GRTC's insurance broker to request and review proposals from insurance companies for these policies. The attached spreadsheet shows recent year coverages and policy premiums. For FY 2021, premiums have decreased for general liability and auto liability due to our loss ratio. This is in contrast to the increase in premiums for employment practices and our umbrella excess liability coverage policies. Increases have been attributed to industry-wide increases with excess insurance carriers. A particular note are the quoted increases in excess liability coverage. GRTC currently holds 20 million of total umbrella liability coverages. The quote for the final 10 million excess liability policy has not been received prior to the board meeting, so are not included in this packet. This will cause a drop in the umbrella coverage from 20 million to 10 million. Upon review of the impact of this change, GRTC found that industry-wide premium increases have caused many transportation businesses to decrease their excess liability coverage from a total coverage amount of 20 million down to 10 million. There's no federal, state, or local mandated minimum level for excess insurance coverage. Based on GRTC's history of not exceeding 10 million coverage needed and delayed quotes for final excess policies, GRT staff is advancing requests for board approval to only include coverage policy for 10 million, total in the amount of $1,643,139. The FY 2021 annual budget included $1,665,249 for these insurance coverages. So this will be paid using budgeted operational funds. Staff will consider the cost savings and risk to GRTC of lowered coverage amount versus advancing negotiations for the final 10 million for the FY 2021 coverage for further discussions at GRTC's board meeting. Staff will also start an evaluation of fully self-insured auto liability and excess coverage in FY 2022 or beyond. GRTC staff requests the Board of Directors approve the CEO to enter into policy contracts for general liability, auto liability for paratransit and fixed route units, umbrella excess liability coverage, employee practices, fiduciary liability, crime insurance, cyber insurance, and professional liability coverage in the amount of $1,643,139 to reflect total umbrella coverage reduced from 20 million to 10 million. And as Julie stated, I think the
my understanding there is that, for the first 10 million, our cost, including our self-insurance, is this year is going to be slightly less than what you had budgeted. Is that correct, Julie?
That is correct.
correct.
1643, Tony, thank you. And what we'd be doing is to approve the $10 million plan and then simply say that we are continuing to look at the issue of the additional 10 million in excess coverage to see what it costs us, whether we can afford it, and whether we think it's a good idea. And we're also authorizing you to continue to look at the option of self-insurance in the future.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have a motion on the, somebody make this motion to approve this, this $10 million first insurance item. And with the, okay, second?
Second.
That includes, I assume, the authorization to go ahead and look at the other two items, possible 10 million more, and begin to study self-insurance. Is that right to the mover? Was that Gary?
I was the seconder, but that's what I.
Who moved it?
George, I think.
I moved it, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it includes the study of the other two, right, George?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good, thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve 10 million and study the next 10 million and self-insurance. Any further conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Is that, do we need to discuss this?
No, I just wanted to ask Tony one question. The Virginia liability pool, transit liability pool, this is not a part of that, I don't imagine.
No, sir. No, sir. And that's something that we've discussed as well. And so far as looking back at, because we have other options with them and going back into the pool, that's something that we're going to look into in the future as well, because that may be a cost savings. It may not. It's just one of those things we'll have to make a decision on.
Yeah, I know we had gotten out of that at one time.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Anything further to say on that? The motion carries.
Tony, one quick question. Do we know how much money we have claimed in the past? Have we ever gotten close to $10 million?
No, we haven't actually come that close. In fact, I talked with the broker yesterday, and the 2 years that they've been with us, we've actually not gone to the second level or the excess of the 10 million. But like I said, it's one of those things where, and I guess it's just the risk manager inside of me, I just don't want to cut anything off right now until we've had a chance to actually look at certain things and do an actual risk analysis. And that's something that we're incorporating our broker into, to do a cost analysis as well. But to answer your question, no, we haven't gotten that yet. Knock on wood.
Great. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Any further questions? All right, thank you very much, Dr. Carter. Excellent work. Our next item on the agenda is air compressor preventive maintenance service, Joey Agee. Mr. Agee.
Good morning.
Morning.
One.
So GRTC currently has 3 air compressors with the function of the 2 major compressors feeding the maintenance floor, body shop, tank and fluid room, and fueling station to operate all the tools and support equipment that the mechanics and service station employees use. The other air compressor is used in the tire shop to operate equipment for changing fleet bus and paratransit vehicle tires. Ingersoll Rand was the original installer of the compressors when GRT headquarters was built in 2010. GRT currently has a service agreement that would expire on August 31st, 2020, and the staff must enter into another to support the performance of the compressors. The compressors are proprietary to Ingersoll Rand, and no other company has authorized. Staff has classified this as a sole source procurement. A cost analysis has been performed to ensure the price of the service agreement is fair and reasonable. Ingersoll Rand's Package Care Service Program offers the following benefits: 100% coverage of all parts, covers the cost of all parts and service labor, and 24-hour monitoring. The 5-year Package Care Service Plan program will cost $117,073. This purchase will be completely funded with operating money. The recommendation is that the Board of Directors authorizes the CEO to issue a purchase order to Ingersoll Rand in the amount of $117,073 for a 5-year service agreement.
We currently have a service agreement with them that's expiring.
We do, August 31st.
And what's the premium on that?
I'm not sure.
Okay, any further questions? Motion, please, to approve this.
So moved.
Yeah, thank you. Second?
Second.
And or something. Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Thank you very much for this report. It's been moved and seconded that we approve this service agreement on the compressors. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? None opposed. It's passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mhm. All right, so now we move to the financial report. Is that correct?
And this month, I'm told that traditionally GRTC does not have a financial report in July as we close the books in June, and the finance department takes this month to do the final closing of it, and that will be reported next month.
Ooh, interesting. You like that, huh, George? Yeah. Okay, well, I'll ask you about that later, but thank you very much. We have a discussion of recent and upcoming procurements with Tanya Thompson. Hi, Tanya.
Good morning, everyone. 2 procurements were approved between the June and July board meetings that were within the purchase price of $50,000 to below $250,000 range. The first approved purchase was for an engine oil analyzer in the amount of $95,413. The analyzer will help the maintenance department monitor the fitness of all of our engines. The second approval was for a cloud subscription service in the amount of $88,431. This service is used to back up all of GRTC's data on our servers. Regarding the current and ongoing procurements in your board packet, you will see we currently have 7 projects in various stages of the procurement process. Of those 7 projects, our plan is to bring a recommendation for the purchase of buses to you at our August board meeting. And as usual, if you know of any vendors who can provide the goods or services GRTC needs, please send them our way. We are more than happy to accept them into the competition process. Are there any questions?
I believe you said that not on this sheet, there is also you're going to bring a can we buy some buses question in August. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. Just a little expenditure, right?
Just
all right. Any further questions of Ms. Thompson? Okay. Thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
All right. Capital Plan Policy Direction, Julian Keisha.
Yes, so Keisha will be doing, she did the lion's share of the work of putting this plan together. And so I will be here to support if necessary, which I know is not. Keisha, I'm really proud of the work she's put together. So Keisha, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Great.
You were gonna say something, Julie?
I wasn't sure if you, since we hadn't discussed it, if you wanted me to share it or if you were going to share it. So,
Oh, no,
sorry.
I haven't. Okay, so the majority of this presentation, Julie has already gone over with the board in January when she got a preliminary approval for the FY20 through FY22 capital plan. I'm going to expand on that by showing what our plan is for FY21 through FY26. We will discuss sources of revenue, our prioritization of needs, and our next steps. So our sources of revenue. These are the same sources of revenue that you've seen before in previous presentations with Julie, our 5307 and 5339 formula funds from FTA. We have the opportunity to start receiving 5337 funds. We have our CMAQ, STBG from TPO. From the state, we have our Smart Scale, along with discretionary grants. We have our local funding, regional funding, which is currently undetermined from the CVTA, and our other funds coming from fare box passes and advertisements. So as far as our 5307, this is where we get the majority of our capital funds, but we also take these funds for our preventive maintenance and the ADA service. Our allocation, of course, is split between GRTC and with Petersburg. On average, our apportionment from FTA for these 5307 funds is approximately $11 million each year. Out of that $11 million, we take $7 million unmatched federal dollars, and it goes toward our PM and our ADA service. That leaves us with $4 million, and once that's matched with the state and local funds at 68% from the state and 4% from our local partners, it gives us 10 million total matched dollars for our capital projects. If we were able to use our entire $11 million allocation from the FTA and match those funds with state at 68% and local at 4%, we would have potentially $39 million to spend on our capital projects, as opposed to the 10 million that we have each year. That's a difference of $29 million we miss out on because $7 million goes toward PM, preventive maintenance, and our ADA service. We have the potential to qualify for 5337 funds. These funds come from our dedicated lanes on our Pulse route. Once a service has been in place for 7 years, the agency becomes eligible. On average, this would give us several $100,000 of unmatched federal dollars. Currently, we are not eligible because our dedicated lanes fall short by 0.729 miles on the Pulse route. Our 5339 annual apportionment is for bus and bus facilities. We get approximately 1.5 each year. Once that's matched at 68% from the state and 4% from our local partners, it gives us just over $5 million to spend on bus and bus facility. We also have our CMAQ funding, and we're eligible to get STBG funds as well. So the total that we anticipate through FY26, we anticipate $75 million for 5307 and 5339. We anticipate $45 million going toward our operations, which is the preventive maintenance and the ADA. We have $27 million in older 5307 and 5339 funds. Those older funds are apportioned funds to us that we have not yet put into a grant, but they are reflected in our capital plan. We also have the $9 million from the sale of Davis Avenue and $2 million in CMAQ funds, which is a total for the 6-year capital plan of funds we anticipate $158 million. So we're going to prioritize our needs. So when we prioritize our needs, they go by state of good repair. We want to improve the current service. We want to advance mobility initiatives and also expand transit usage. Once we get a capital project, we identify its priority. Our first priority is safety. Second priority is any committed projects. We've already started these projects. They're good projects and we're going to see them through. Those funds go there. Next, we make sure that our preventive maintenance and ADA is funded. Then we look at state of good repair. That's for our fleet, for our facilities, and for IT. Then we look for any projects that are business improvements, which are internal, any service improvements, which are external, like shelters. And then we can look toward service expansion or any high capacity transit development. These projects have already been identified in our current capital plan. The first three, the safety management plan, which you've adopted this morning, our annual preventive maintenance and ADA, and we've also taken care of our fleet replacement plan. The next three are in progress, and the final two are accounted for in our capital plan, but have not started yet. This slide shows how the money is going to be spent. Our capital plan currently requires $160 million through FY26. And as you can see, the majority, over 1/2, which is actually 51%, goes toward our state of good repair. The next largest portion, the $56 million, that is the funds we require to put toward preventive maintenance and ADA, which is not being used for capital projects. On this graph, it shows how we're planning to spend the money by priority. You'll see for the first category, safety, nothing is there currently. Our current safety and regulatory projects are actually committed, and you'll see them in the blue line in the second section. Any of our future initiatives, they are still being currently vetted, and once we've agreed that they are projects we want to move forward with, money from 5, 6, and 7 will have to come over to make sure that safety comes first. The third section shows PM and ADA. And as you can see, it's pretty steady at approximately $9 million each year. It actually should increase, well, it actually could potentially increase year over year by 3% based off of inflation. Our next biggest section is the state of good repair. That's where we replace all of our fixed route and paratransit vehicles and any facility needs that we have for state of good repair. What this tells us is the last 3 sections, which are business improvements, service improvements, and any service expansion, there's very little money left. And that would be money we would need for park and rides, shelter projects, any fleet or service expansion. So these are our assumptions. Unlike operating, our capital funds do roll over from one year to the next. Capital funds become very limited due to the majority of the allocations that we receive going toward preventive maintenance. Actually, 64%. We have 11 million, 7 million, which is 64% goes toward our preventive maintenance and ADA. Secondly, the current plan assumes a consistent 68% match from the state and at least 4% from our local partners. This assumption can change based on the availability of state funds and policy changes within the state. Thirdly, we will be applying for additional transportation funds through CMAQ and STVG for bus replacements. When we do that, that'll free up more money in our 5307 to do other capital initiatives. Fourth, we are at risk of running low on local funds. If that occurs, we will not be able to utilize the federal funds because federal funds require that we use non-federal match dollars. And fifth, operating funding. And now I'll pass it on to Julie for next steps.
Thank you, Keisha. That's perfect. Next steps will be really having a discussion with the board on some of the risks and the fundamental assumptions we're using to build this blueprint, and also to look at how we have this conversation with the region to advance the BRT lines that have been discussed, like the north-south BRT lines, how we advance some of the regional parking lines for the regional service, how those are funded, and how we start building up a better reserve for the local capital match, and to protect and grow the system. That we are in a very solid, I would say, position in maintaining and managing the system and service that we have now. We need to partner more aggressively, both at the local, regional, and state level, to increase our federal funds, increase our capital funds, if we're going to expand the system to be that regional network that we've been discussing, to have those park and rides, to have the dedicated lanes, to have better infrastructure for shelters at the temporary transfer center. And so we'll, based on the discussion we have with the board, the direction of the policy of the board, and with the region, we'll continue to modify this blueprint, bring to you specific projects that are underlying this plan for prioritization and approvals. Again, anything that's in this blueprint would not be advanced unless it came to this board for specific individual approvals and identification of funding within the blueprint and our plans. But this is timely to bring to the board as we consider multiple year operational budgeting and multi-year capital budgeting and the future of regional funds coming into the program. And that is basically the conclusion of this from a discussion standpoint, and we look forward to your considerations and direction.
So who would like to ask a question or make a comment on this? Thank you so much for that presentation. That was excellent.
Yeah, Julie, I'm not sure if I'm understanding exactly correctly, but if we think about the CVTA money that's dedicated to transit, if it comes in strong, more dollars of that can go to operations. And if that happens, then less federal dollars get flexed into operations, meaning there would be more federal capital dollars. Am I saying that the right way?
Well, that's definitely one of the things that we need to consider. As the CVTA money comes in, at this point, I don't expect that we would use it or that there would be enough of it to push the federal money out of our operation budget. If you remember the pie charts I showed at the very beginning of the board meeting, we've lost the fare revenue, the local allocations are cut by half, our cleaning expenses are increased. And then when you look at the amount of money that we expect to come in from CVTA, around $30 million a year, that doesn't leave much extra to push that federal back into capital unless we get more local funding or we get more put fares back. So again, those are the push and pulls between the operational budget and how we fund it and how we can push money back into capital, or do we get more aggressive with discretionary grants at the state and federal level, CMAQ and STBG, to shore up more capital? Again, policy decisions and strategies for how we fund these two interdependent sources of funding. So okay. I'm not sure if I completely answered that. The answer is maybe.
Yes, I figured it was probably maybe. I have one follow-up question.
Okay.
Given the way that, we were thinking with all the increased ridership and success of GRTC that we thought we would be accessing more state funding, maybe grant, I don't know, federal funding. How do we think that's going to be impacted by the pandemic and ridership and all of that?
definitely, I do expect that we will, for this fiscal year, see the reduction of state based on what we had originally expected back in January and February. January and February, the state was definitely looking at the omnibus transportation bill and looking at a more significant increase in transit funding across the state. And we fully expected we would be one of a key beneficiary of that increase. We had expected higher operational subsidies. There were also programs for to help low-income riders, and there were programs to help subsidize regionally significant routes such as the Pulse. And we were looking forward to applying for and accessing those. With COVID depressing the economy, right now GRPT is assessing our annual allocation subsidies quarter by quarter at this rate. They seem to be coming in equivalent to what we received last year, which is a decrease of what we expected, and certainly doesn't have the other opportunities yet for regional other discretionary pots of funding. So it's a long way of saying COVID has certainly put us in a situation where we're having to watch it closely next year, the year after, when the economy recovers. I expect we will see increases back to what we were before and even higher, as if we stay zero fare. Every indication that we have based on the type of service we have in place, the policies we have in place, who we serve and how we serve them, it is very likely that we will see large increases in ridership once COVID passes and if zero fare stay in the balance. And with a higher increase of ridership, it takes about a year to 2 years to start seeing some of those allocations come back from the federal increase, and the state, I think, is about a year. The higher our ridership, the higher our share of those federal and state formula funds will be, and we'll start seeing increases there as well. But a lot of it's crystal ball work at this point.
Other comments, questions? Julie, I've never been in a conversation with you or others about park and ride, but park and ride in Richmond was a strategy for having one-way buses that served only suburban people coming in town and prevented urban people from going out to jobs. And that was used on 2 of the major arteries of the 7 arteries serving the city, actually on 3 of them. So I think that as we look at expansion, the issue of whether we try to push for rapid routes on major arteries rather than park and ride is a pretty serious one to ask. And personally, I have some pretty strong feelings about it because I've lived in Virginia too long.
No, I absolutely agree that when we look at mobility and we look at what our strategies are for how we fund service, we definitely have to look at the balance of the resources we put into some of our urban core routes that serve the key businesses in the region and maybe some of the more economic distressed areas, the coverage of that service for the region, and also providing some level of service for the connectivity of the suburban routes, that having that connectivity there balances, reduces possible congestion on those routes and the downtown level of car usage that does impact our ability to flow through. So it is complex, and I do agree that we want to put more resources into serving our certainly economically more needy areas versus some areas that might be more economically advantaged. I do agree with that wholeheartedly, but there is still the need for park and rides to be able to balance the congestion of the area and traffic flows for some of those intra-regional routes. So I know that's a lengthy response to say I agree with you, but I also believe there's a need for a park and ride.
Julie, it's immoral to have a park and ride down Midlothian Turnpike if you don't have a bus going out Midlothian to enable people to get employment. And it's immoral to have a park and ride going down Hull Street if you don't have a bus going out Hull Street to enable people to seek employment. That is the thing we're talking about here, because we still have the lowest geographic coverage of any city our size in the world. Of the 500 largest cities in the world, we have the smallest footprint of public transportation. And that's really a heritage of severe racial discrimination in Richmond, and we cannot not address it. And so I really understand what you're saying about a mixed thing, but we've got a serious remediation piece of work to do here. And we've got to pay attention to that as we go forward. Other comments or questions? Look, thank you so much for doing this work, Keisha and Julie. This is really very helpful, and all of us I know have our eye on the possibility of how we pull a little bit more of that federal money out so that we can get a higher match on it for capital purposes, and also that tantalizing little figure of 0.7 additional miles of dedicated lane that might give us a $200,000 or $300,000 federal boost as well. Are there other questions on the capital presentation here? All right, thank you. We have one further action item. Julie, I think
Yes,
this
sir.
is the VCU proposal.
Yes, sir. Last month when we approved the the operational budget, sorry, I have to switch gears for a second. The operating budget for FY21, it included a assumption of the VCU contract. We have a 3-year contract with VCU that provides for their subsidies of operations, particularly with the Pulse and the Route 5 that serves their campus to provide increased frequencies in service for their students, their faculty, the staff, and for the university and for the healthcare center. Based on the COVID conditions and the expected reduced service needed by the campus as they reduce their on-site classroom operations, they go virtual, their need for that service is also reduced. They requested a negotiation of a reduction of their first payment of the second year of their contract, which is due on August 31st, by 50%, which is consistent with some of the reductions we've also seen from our local partners. We were able to successfully have that reduction approved both on their side and on the side here. I did sign that contract as I was given approval to enter into contract negotiations with our funding partners. I do ask that the board ratify this contract amendment with the appropriation of CARES Act revenue that we put into a contingency fund for this purpose to cover the difference of $394,503.05 and to maintain a balanced budget and to help support our community partners as they also suffer through the economic depression of COVID.
All right. Can I have a motion to ratify this this change in the VCU contract?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. All right, conversation. VCU doesn't know what it's doing any more than the rest of us do this fall, and that's part of their problem too. They don't know if will be doing what, where. So, and as we can see from the Pulse ridership, I think we're down 44% on that one, which would be a lot of that's VCU usage. All right, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That's pretty listless approval there, folks. All opposed? All right, thank you. It's been moved. We've passed this ratification of the VCU contract alteration. Are there? Let's see what comes next here. Chief Executive Officer's report.
Yes, sir. Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I believe that we will actually have our first virtual board meeting ending within a 2-hour mark as opposed to 3 hours. The last two have been marathon meetings, so I'm pleased that this one is being more, while still very useful to you, more considerate of your morning. I do have not great news to report. Unfortunately, as of yesterday, late yesterday, we received information that we do now have 2 new positive cases of COVID-related illness with GRTC staff. That will be going out to the press as a press release today. While we work through internal notifications of our staff, some of that has already come out and some of it will come out today. These are non-operating facing, non-public facing positions. And I believe that through what we put in place, the tracking, the training, the communications, we were able to identify both of these cases very, very early, put quarantine, get testing and isolation in place. So I think it just goes to show how effective our strategies are being in identifying and quarantining cases as they come up and before they become potential clusters within the agency. I know that other industries across the state are struggling with this, and I believe that the policies that were adopted by this board are critical in our ability to manage it and have been successful in doing so. Still, we have to look at the use of masks on the buses by our customers and our riders. While we are seeing a high percentage of folks who are complying with the mask mandate as the governor comes out and is looking to have a higher enforcement of masks, we need to reconsider whether or not we are able to also enforce the use of masks by our passengers. Unlike a brick and mortar facility such as a Walmart, who can close off every entrance but one, create a line and put someone there to actively block anyone from coming in without a mask, our buses, of course, don't have that luxury. Our operators are in the front of the bus operating, and as they stop to provide someone service as they get on, to ask them to put on a mask, to give them a mask, and if they refuse, to then force them off the bus is really outside of the training that our operators receive. They're not police officers, they are bus operators, they're community servants in that respect. We have been asked to consider a no mask, no move policy, and we are seriously considering implementing that this week or by the end of the month, and putting out a messaging where if someone does get onto the bus and we offer them a mask and they refuse to wear, the bus will not move until that person either puts on a mask or leaves the bus. It's a pretty serious.
Do that, Julie.
I've been asked by both the union and by a significant number of operators and by riders as well. It is not being asked by the state. However, when you look at the governor's mandate and some of the rules being put into place by the Department of Health and being imposed on OSHA, Department of Labor, we are being told that we need to start enforcing the no mask rule or the mask rule. And this is one way that we could possibly do that.
Do you have any comparative stuff on that from other systems?
We do not. We do not. I do know that anecdotally that I have heard rumors that there are some folks that have taken it on themselves to implement it, and it seems to be working. So I appreciate that our operators and other systems across the country are sometimes having to take initiatives on their own, and those initiatives seem to be working. We have not had any operator catch COVID or become ill for over 5 weeks. And I believe, again, that goes back to the strategy we've been using, the high level of mask wearing. We've been able to hand out nearly 40,000 masks. We are purchasing more to continue to hand out. But there's always the risk that as we push the issue of enforcement, that we'll also push people to push back. So it's a very cautious, very tentative movement forward, but considering the OSHA guidelines that we're going to be required to enforce these rules, that the governor's saying we're across the board, employers are required to enforce these rules, we need to keep considering options. And as of yet, I have not heard of one better than no mask, no move. We are also looking at, as ridership continues to increase, that some of our buses are very full with 20, 30, or 40 passengers at a time. With the bungee cord keeping the operator safe, a lot of those passengers are now packed towards the back of the bus, which means social distancing is almost impossible. But it's another reason why we need to start enforcing the mask requirement as they get on and they have no mask and they're not able to social distance. Even though we're cleaning the buses and we're keeping air circulating through the buses, it's very important for us to stay ahead of this. We're looking at a consideration of, once we're able to more effectively enforce masks on the bus, move that bungee cord closer to the operator We would still keep that 6 feet of distance between the operations, operators and riders, but it would provide more room for the passengers. We also have the driver shield up that helps protect the operators, and the mask rule for the operators, as well as driver shields. So we'll be very cautious moving forward, but these are things that we are at this point considering how to improve what we already believe to be very safe operations on our system. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. We do expect ridership will continue to increase as businesses reopen, as VCU reopens, as the city and the state reopen. So in mid-August and September, we will keep seeing higher ridership on our buses. With that, turning to something a little bit nicer, I did receive a call from Delegate McQuinn asking that I sit on a panel for the 30th anniversary of ADA this Saturday to talk about transportation and what GRTC is doing to serve the ADA community. And while I was, my pride was certainly complimented by that request, sometimes common sense is a better part of valor, and Tim Barham, who has been working on ADA issues for a couple of decades, will actually be sitting in my place to answer those because of his expertise in it. He also sat on a similar panel for the 20th anniversary of ADA, so I'm very proud that he will represent us on that panel this Saturday. And with that, I have no other further updates other than looking for rain and cooler days to help serve our passengers as they are out in this awful, awful heat. And we'll look for cooler, saner days in the coming months. With that, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I conclude my CEO report for July.
Are there other comments from other board members before I give my report, which will last 45 seconds?
Really, I have a question. Do we have a sense of how many of what our percentage of ridership are not wearing masks? So anyway, I didn't think we did, but I thought at least to ask.
No, from the few times that I've ridden the bus, from what I've heard from others, the best we have is a gut that it's the majority of people are wearing masks. The majority are. But again, you get the disgruntled few that are very loud. And so they take up all the air in the room. And that's what we're, sorry, that was a bad pun, unintentional. We'll continue to work to try and see exactly how many people this is impacting. We're really watching the ADA rules, the OSHA rules, the CDC guidance on how we can implement and enforce these rules, but how many people it will affect, I can't tell you exactly now. But I believe it is a minor part of our community. Most people seem to be complying with the mask rule, and I've actually heard anecdotally of some passengers confronting other passengers to ask them to wear. So they're taking it seriously.
Other comments from board members or staff? All right, well, thank you very much. I just want to say how grateful I am to the staff of GRTC. This is a very, very strange time, and and this operation has done a marvelous job. Our employees who are out there on the street or working to either clean or maintain the buses, and our office employees have kept this thing going in a marvelous way. And it's an encouragement, I think, to all of us. And how we make it through, I don't know, but this bus is moving and doing a good job. And I want you to pray for Julie today. This is an important meeting with the city to try to begin to bring on board the full city operation. As I said, there are at least three decision-making groups in the city government at the moment, at this moment in time. Doesn't work like y'all do out in Chesterfield or Henrico or Hanover, where the county administrator just says what it's going to be. Here in Richmond, we have lots of folks we have to talk to. And so today is a very important meeting with city council people. Any further comments? All right, if there's no further business, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks.
You.
Thanks.
Thank
Happy
you.
birthday to Eldridge.
Oh, happy birthday
Oh, it is? Oh, gosh.
I believe it was yesterday.
Birthday to
to
you.
you.
Happy
Happy
birthday.
birthday to you.
Happy
Happy
birthday,
birthday, dear
Eldridge.
Eldridge.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
To you.
That was really, really kind of pathetic, but thank you for putting that out there.
So if I sung.
All right, folks. Blessings.
Thank you.
Hope we get to do something fun. Take care.
Take care.